Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is a bit of a recap of PAX Unplugged, my experience there, what I did, what I saw, what I didn't see, who I didn't get to stop by, general convention experiences. This is very much, I'll probably try to throw some images in, but no guarantee. I do have a few shots, not a lot. This is very much going to be more podcast style, just talking about, not that different than a lot of my content, to be fair, but just talking about my experiences and what went on there. Throw it on in the background, go ahead and tidy up whatever room you're in, or something like that, or whatever. That's just my suggestion. But PAX Unplugged, this was my second convention ever. I've been to Origins and now PAX Unplugged, and this was it. Based on my experience with Origins and also having a busy life, both of these are factors, I decided to go to PAX Unplugged for only Sunday. It's a Friday through Sunday convention. I decided to go for just one day. I felt when I went to Origins that while I enjoyed the multiple days I had there, that really going for a single day would get me a lot of that experience. Now, I do want to go to conventions for all the days, but I'm still juggling enough things that I have to make decisions and trade-offs, and I felt that it's a 6.5 hour drive. 6.5 hour drive, so for me it's not the worst. I'm not flying in, I'm not doing anything like that. 6.5 hour drive, Saturday night, drove in, slept that night, and then went to PAX the next morning, and then that evening left again and arrived back at 2 a.m. or whatever it was. So getting a solid 12 hours of driving, 13 hours of driving in a 24-hour period, experiencing a full day of the convention, wandering around as much as possible. Now, to be fair, I think in future years, as things potentially open back up more and more, I may want to go for more days. As of right now, conventions are still experiencing less compared to what they were before COVID, and so I think in that single day, I got to see and stop by and talk to, I want to say maybe 80 to 90% of the booths that I would have wanted to. It would have been great to find time to talk to the others, but that would have required a full other day, and it's a balance for me. But that's just a note. I think if you go to a convention for a single day, you are getting a decent amount of the experience, so that's something that you might want to consider if you're looking at it as, well, I can only do one day, it's not worth it then. It might well be worth it. For me, it was. I had a great time with only a day. Granted, if you're only going for a day, I do recommend not playing a lot of games because that will really eat into the single day you have. And with that, I'll timestamp the various sections. For me, I just have my little notes of the various booths I stopped by, just general notes of things I want to talk about, some visual aids on the table of things I picked up or want to talk about, and then the booths I didn't stop by. And so I'm going to start with the booths I didn't stop by because I'm going to rattle by those pretty quickly. Many of these I wanted to, and some of these I meant to and just forgot or whatever. Some of these I didn't even know were at the convention until later, and some of these I tried stopping by a few times, never found a good opening, and never really got to talk or do whatever. So just a few booths that were there, and this is not a comprehensive list of everyone that was there, but this is a comprehensive list of the things I was interested in, of the ones I talked to and didn't talk to. So the ones I missed were Inside Up Games, Cosmos. Cosmos was there. Elk Creek Games. Elk Creek Games I didn't have a chance to stop by, unfortunately. Panda, I do have Atlantis Rising as my visual aid over there. I decided to pick up Atlantis Rising again to give it another shot. Atlantis Rising is a game that I liked. I have a video way back in Pandemic, and then eventually it left my collection, but I kind of, with the expansion that they had, I kind of wanted to get Atlantis Rising back and see. I always enjoyed it. The question is how much. So I have it back. I just read through the rules again. I'm going to be diving back into it. I always liked it. I had complaints. We'll save it for another review. That's not the topic of this conversation, but that's Atlantis Rising from Elf Creek Games. Pandasaurus was there. Plaid Hat Games. Plaid Hat Games I really wanted to stop by and talk to about their newest games, the Familiar Tales. I really wanted to talk to them about that. I did not have a chance. Ares Games was there. Ares, not Ares. Yeah, Ares. They do like War of the Ring and all that. I did not even realize they were there until later, which is a shame because, well, I would have loved to stop by. Chip Theory Games. Chip Theory Games was there with their giant booth. I stopped by and spoke to them a lot at Origin, so I didn't really make the time this time. Devere Games was there. They have a bunch of games that I have really enjoyed this year, as well as some that I still have to play. Batoku, I'm looking at you. Restoration Games was there. Smirk and Dagger. Talent Strike Studios, which I didn't even realize till after I would have loved to stop by and say hi. I've covered a bunch of their games in the past. Wise Wizard Games, Dr. Finn's Games, which I would have loved to stop by Dr. Finn's as well, or Wise Wizard as well. Everything Epic, Flat Out Games. I did not realize Flat Out was there. I love all the games. I did not realize that they're at the convention at all. Lynn Vander Studios. That's another one that I would have loved to stop by. They did that game, that big Kickstarter game, the one I'm forgetting the name of. They did that big Kickstarter game that's based on a video game that I'm blanking on the name. Lynn Vander Studios. I'm blanking on the name. You know it. Someone in the comments knows it. I'll look it up later, but whatever. Ryder Games was there, and Hot Banana Games, who did Steam Up. All these are various booths that I missed that I didn't have a chance to stop by or didn't realize they were there or whatever. Would have loved to make the time, but again, that's the balance there. Now with that, let's go ahead and a little bit more into detail in the booths I did stop by, what I saw, some interesting things. I think there were, I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video to like hold your attention, but there were a bunch of things at PAX that were very interesting. Like I said, I'm very glad I went. I'm glad I got the opportunity, both personally speaking for the channel, for like the fact that I'm building connections with people that I've worked with, or building connections with people I haven't worked with. Those are all useful for me. But that's less the conversation here and more about just my general convention experience and what it's like to wander through for those of you who don't go. I never really went to conventions until I started doing videos. And I think it's a lot of fun. But I will say, one thing that constantly does baffle me is the fact that there are a lot of games. There are some things that are different. Some things you can only get at conventions. Like something like, if you want a full all-in pledge of Final Girl and you missed the Kickstarter, yeah, conventions are going to be the way to go. If you want, I don't know what I have, if you want the Kickstarter edition of Radlands, they have that over there. They have a bunch of games that are hard to get your hands on at conventions. But then one thing that still baffles me, and I feel bad for, I mean, I work with a lot of the retailers, the publishers who sell games at conventions, but a lot of games at conventions are just expensive. Meaning I think that there's two reasons to buy a game at a convention that I can think of. Maybe there's another, but I can only really think of two reasons. One is getting games that are hard to get otherwise. Getting games you missed your chance on, they're exclusive editions, or something like that. Again, Final Girl would be a great example there. I don't have anything else there. I don't know. Another reason, it just falls in the same category, but Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders over there, that's one that it's new. It's fresh off the boat or whatever, so it's hard to get your hands on. So again, exclusionary items are things that are easier to get your hands on at conventions. Sure, you'll get it first, or you get premier access. Great. The other reason is to support the publisher. I guess three reasons to support the publisher, and then the third reason is because it's part of the convention experience for you. That it's fun. It is fun to come home with a few bags full of games as part of your convention experience. The reason I say those are the reasons is because generally most games will cost you more at conventions than they will if you just buy them online. Buying the exact same game online at your local online retailer versus buying it at a convention, buying it online is cheaper if you can get it. Almost always. If you have the same access, it's almost always cheaper online. And it's not a ding against the publishers. The practical reality is when you go to a convention, the publishers have to get those games to the convention. That costs them extra money compared to whatever warehouse they're at. There's a reason they will cost more. It's because there are increased costs involved. That does not mean that you as a consumer should be buying those games. So I always just find it interesting. Again, some things I understand because they're hard to get your hands on. Other times, I feel like it has to be that you're paying a premium to get your hands on a game that is available for the same price online right now. You can have it waiting at your doorstep when you come home by just buying it online. So I find that fascinating. I'm curious if you buy games at conventions for more than they otherwise would cost. Let me know in the comments down below why. Because for me, it's usually a combination of harder to get access, or I'm willing to occasionally spend a few dollars more on a small handful of things. Like if you look at the amount of things I came back with, I would say most of them are either things that are hard to get your hands on, or they're new, or there are one or two items which I was willing to make exceptions for. And then in some cases, there are also publisher review copies. So that's a different story, because if I'm not paying for it, I will take it from the convention just fine. But yeah, that is just a curiosity around the nature of convention spending that I still find interesting. But past that, going through general, I just have this in random order. Let's go ahead and just start from the top and work our way down. And timestamps down below in case you want to see any particular section about, well, various stuff. Starting with Borderlands, I had a chance to stop by the Monster Mini Club, or Mighty Mini, I can't remember the name of the company that's doing Borderlands on Kickstarter right now, although it's probably ending as we speak very, very shortly. So yeah, but they're basically, they have an ongoing Kickstarter, or just end the Kickstarter, but I had a chance to try Borderlands, which was fun. It's a game that I had already watched the Learn to Play video from, well, I already watched the How to Play video from Learn to Play Games YouTube channel, and I already got a feel for what the game was like. But I was able to dive in, try a few rounds, destroy a bunch of the various minions or baddies, whatever you call them, in Borderlands, and it is exactly what I thought. It's rolling dice, having fun. The part I'm not sure, because I have to play it for more than 20 minutes to get a good feel for, is how much do I like it. Certainly an enjoyable experience, certainly strategic, certainly choices. A lot of the choices really come down to optimizing your weapon, the weapon you're using, the character you're using, the action dice you're using, and then which enemies you're targeting, and trying to plan through the sequence of how things will work or not work in your favor as you go through it. Decent amount of strategy, lots of rolling dice, lots of fun. Whether or not it's a game that I think I am back in it right now, Whether or not it's a game that stays in my collection long term will depend on how fun it is compared to other games in that genre, but definitely enjoyed that one. From there we have Roxley Games. I had a chance to stop by Roxley. I've definitely covered a few other games. We have Dice Throne Battle Chess Season 1 over here. I want to do a full unboxing of that at some point with like adventures and everything. We'll get to that. But really for me, the highlight of Roxley was picking up Radlands. I had a chance to try Radlands even before I went there, but basically my friend, Devin Norse, who you've seen on the channel, Devin brought a copy of Radlands in, and we've been going back and forth with it, so I easily picked up a copy while I was there. I'll probably be upgrading it to the deluxe copy as well, because Radlands is just so ridiculously fun. I've already reviewed it on the channel. I played a bunch with Devin, got this in, immediately started playing with everyone. I've been playing with anyone from game group people to my wife to my nephew, just going through this game, really having a lot of fun diving through Radlands. It's a game that I absolutely overlooked when it was on Kickstarter. Not overlooked in the sense I didn't know it existed, but overlooked in the sense that I was like, okay, it's a pretty game from Roxley. Roxley makes pretty games. Doesn't mean it's going to be a game for me, and it's absolutely a game for me. Radlands is definitely a highlight for me. Past that, a lot of people are playing Mavel Dice Throne. Just going through both Dice Throne and Mavel Dice Throne, having fun, sitting up, playing at the tables. They also have Steampunk Rally. Steampunk Rally is always a game that I want to dive back into, because I enjoyed Steampunk Rally. I really did. And then they came out with Steampunk Rally Fusion. It's one that eventually left my collection because I found that it mostly felt like I was playing a little solo, and it could drag a bit as other people were doing their own thing. Like building your own machine and rearranging was always a bit of work, but it's a really good game. It's just a really good game that didn't stay in my collection, and the laundry list of those it's a long laundry list because there's a lot of good games out there, and you have to pick and choose. We have Floodgate. Floodgate Games, who are most famous for Sagrada, obviously. They had 2 games. I should probably have looked at the titles of these beforehand. They had 2 games. What were they? I'm going to look it up right now. But they had 2 games over there that I tried, both upcoming games, not coming to Kickstarter, coming to retail. Let me see if I could find Floodgate over here. But both of them were interesting. One was about keeping kites in the air. The other one was about rearranging houses, okay? Those are the 2 themes of the 2 games. I'm going to look it up while I speak. The kite one basically involved flipping timers. You had timers that once you started the timers, you can never let the timers run out. So you're playing cards with colors in them to keep the timers rotating, to keep the timers going, always in motion effectively. You're trying to keep them running as opposed to having them run out, which is an interesting challenge in and of itself. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it, but it's a real-time game, which means most real-time games, with few exceptions, but some exceptions, I find don't actually stay in my collection. They're enjoyable experiences, but ones that I don't end up keeping. It's actually called, fittingly enough, it's called Kites. So Kites, I enjoyed it. It's one I'm happy I tried, not one I feel I need to pick up. If they send it to me to cover it, I'll cover it, but again, I enjoyed it. It's a fun little, quirky little puzzle, but it's a one-trick pony, unless this stuff, and this is always possible because of the way you try games at conventions, where they kind of teach you the basic version. So it could be there's more to the game that makes it worth really diving into. Otherwise, I think it's very much a one-trick pony. A decent party game one-trick pony, but not a lot of nuance or depth to it, just fun. Then we have Decorum. Decorum, which is the other game, which is about rearranging this space you're moving into with various people who have different objectives, and you're trying to rearrange the furniture so that everyone's happy. And it's a little bit of a passive-aggressive silent communication as you go through it, because what you're effectively doing is you're putting like something down into the room. So you put down a blue lamp, and meanwhile your opponent has a card, your teammate has a card that says something like, I can't have blue stuff in that room. But they're like, no, I don't really want that in there. They just take it out. They can't tell you what they can do. They can just tell you they don't want it. And so now you don't know what the rules are. You don't know if they don't want lamps in that room. You don't know if they don't want blue things in their room. You don't know if maybe they don't want anything lamps on the bottom floor of the house. There's all these different rules that you're trying to juggle and figure out through just telling people what you do and don't want, and you have a limited number of turns to get there. I really enjoyed it. I tend to enjoy that kind of logical deduction pathway. Really enjoyed Decorum from Floodgate. Then I stopped by Mythic Mischief. And when I say "and then" for this entire video, I just mean "and then I have Mythic Mischief" written down. The order that I went to these booths is totally different. Mythic Mischief, I've covered a bunch of the games in general. I've covered, well, when I say a bunch of the games, I've covered Mythic Mischief and Moonrakers. But they had Moonrakers, and they had Moonrakers for sale at the booth over there, so that was going well. Mythic Mischief they were demoing. I love Mythic Mischief. It's a fantastic game. I enjoy Moonrakers, but I love Mythic Mischief. But I think they sold out like the first day or something of Moonrakers, so it's good for them. Very happy. I know that they had issues with getting their stock in time for other conventions. So other conventions were more showing, and then, hey, you could back stuff, but it was more about their presence. Versus this time was presence and sales, so I'm happy they sold all of that. We have Sovranti. Sovranti is a competitor to Board Game Arena and Tabletop Simulator, in a sense, when I say competitor. What Sovranti does is it offers the guided framework you'll get when you're playing on Board Game Arena or Yukata, where it's rules enforced. But then it offers a three-dimensional space that you get out of Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, and is offering the hybrid of those two. So it's rules enforced 3D space. Now, I believe they do have a rotation. I think the tiers they have is they have a rotation of free games that you can generally have, so you can pop on and see, oh, hey, these are the free games that are available this particular week. Or you could instead pop on and have a subscription, and there's two different tiers. I believe there's a subscription where you can play certain games, and anyone else who has a subscription can play those games. And then there's like a host subscription where you can play those games and you can host it for anyone else. Different tiers, different costs. I don't remember how many games they have right now. I know they're constantly trying to increase their library. It's still fairly new as far as things in the board game space. I have to try it myself. I have not actually dived into it yet, but I do plan on checking into it. I spoke to them a bit. I want to talk more about the platform in general, because I think I've always gone back and forth as to which platform I prefer as far as Board Game Arena, Yukata, Tabletopia, Tabletop Simulator, all that. I like the 3D feel of the different spaces, but I like the rules enforcement of the other platforms. The fact that I don't have to worry about watching, because when I'm playing a game in real life, when I'm sitting down with you and playing a game, I can easily track what you're doing and tell you if you're making a mistake. That's easy. When I'm playing a game online, unless you know the rules too, it's so hard to follow people and be sure that they're not making mistakes when you're playing online, at least for myself. So I go back and forth as to which platforms I prefer. Tabletop Simulator is my preferred platform when everyone knows the rules, but if I'm playing with people who don't know the rules, I prefer things like Yukata or Board Game Arena that enforce the rules. So I really like the idea of a platform that merges the two. So I plan on looking more into Sovranti for myself. I think the biggest weakness is I do have the smallest library from all the big platforms. I think that will be a strike against them as far as general acceptance, and I think they need to work on that as fast as possible. But I really like the idea of the platform. Then we have Velocity Vanguard. Velocity Vanguard, which I found on the last, well, I was only there for one day, but I found on the last day of the convention, the only day that I was there. But I was walking past there. I didn't realize they were there, but I just saw the giant table hog that is Velocity Vanguard. Really enjoy that game. It's such a good game. I believe you can still late pledge. Maybe I'll throw a link down below if I remember, but you can still late pledge for it shortly before they wrap things up. It's a really, really solid game that is the most interesting movement mechanism I've ever seen. The entire game is a puzzle around this movement mechanism. Really solid. You can check out my review on it if you want, but it was great to see it in action and seeing people just sit down and enjoy what is one of the more innovative systems I've seen in a long time. And it's not a one-trick, well, that's not true. It is a one-trick pony. It is very much a one-trick pony, but it's a one-trick pony that doesn't get boring because of the scenarios they have. You can play it solo, cooperative, competitive, and each scenario provides a different way to deal with that one-trick pony. So it is a one-trick pony. It's about the manipulation and the momentum you have in space, as you have to plan several turns out as your ship's drifting through space. But then there's missiles, and there's crew members, and there's abilities, and the scenarios. So while it is a one-trick pony, it's a one-trick pony that I don't believe gets boring, at least not quickly, because of the wide amount of stuff they have. We have Studio H. Hachette Games, I think it's called Hachette Games. Studio H Games, who have a bunch of games. They've started taking on some other games from, I can't remember the name of the company, but Ultra and Icky. They have a bunch of games that they've been working with as well, so I hope to pick up those from them. But basically, I've reviewed Shamans from Studio H. I've reviewed Thing of Valir. Thing of Valir is probably their most famous game at this point. Some amazing, not Thing of Valir, Nidavellir. Thing of Valir is the expansion. But they have a bunch of solid games. I still have to review or cover some of them, but the ones I have tried, I've enjoyed, and Ultra and Icky both look fascinating. Ultra is a little bit of a cooperative experience as you go through a storytelling kind of range. It's kind of storytelling / pandemic. It's from Antoine Bazo. And then Icky is one of those Euros that have a lot of interweaving mechanisms you have to be mindful of. Both looked very solid. Haven't played either, but I was demoed both of them, so I plan on looking into those. We have Van Ryder, who, I believe sold out completely of almost everything they had. I know they got rid of all their Final Girl within, the first few days. The whole convention's a few days. I keep saying things like, my last day, which was my only day. The first few days, the convention's only 3 days. But they got rid of all the Final Girl, completely sold out. This one, by the way, got a Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. I believe it was a 9 out of 10 from Mike over on the Dice Tower. I plan on diving into it. For me, I was always intrigued by Hosta's Negotiator, their original game, but the reviews on it were always mixed, so I never picked it up for myself because some people love it and some people are mixed, and I just never got into picking it up. Versus Final Girl seems to build on those systems and give a game that a lot of people really, really enjoy. I passed on this when I was on Kickstarter, similar to Radlands, passed on it, and now I'm having the FOMO of, oh no, I passed on it, and I want to pick it up because I don't have enough games. Then we have Thunderworks Games. I stopped by them briefly just to speak to them about a few things, but they have dungeon role-play adventures, which I don't think they sold out. I think they had like 2 or 3 copies left at the end of the convention, and then they have cartographers, which is amazing. But those I have to play role-play adventures. I haven't actually gotten around to it yet. I don't own a copy, which is why I haven't gotten around to it. I have to eventually get a copy to play it, but we'll go from there. We have Haba Games, who I've written down as Haha Games, so I'm glad I remembered what that was. Haba Games, who Haba has this game. This game I picked up for the kids. Already played it a few times. This is The Key. Now, they have 3 different versions of this as of right now, with different levels of difficulty, but even the starter level of difficulty is definitely, you're talking about older kids. Like, I find this a lot of fun. I'm curious to see what the intermediate ones do as far as taking to the next level. But this is a game that you should play with your older children. I think younger children will be a little hard unless you're playing along with them. Although it could be great for developing some little skill set about problem deduction and whatnot. But the older one, the intermediate one, I want to pull out and play with my wife. Because honestly, this is a challenge even for Ricky, my daughter, who's fairly good at a lot of games. And this one's a challenge for her. She played it, she got it, but this was a good meaty challenge. I'm curious what intermediate does and how that makes you think through things. But The Key is an amazing game. You can actually check out before you play. Before you play, just started doing their top 100. You should check out that. Not top 100, top 50. But The Key was in there, and they're the ones who told me about The Key originally. Them and Jeremy Howard both talked about The Key and how it's such a great experience. And I'm so happy that I listened to them because this is fantastic. The general idea of it is that you're playing one of those games of, you know, Tony's mother is Sarah's cousin, and the person who's Sarah's cousin is shorter than 4 feet, and the people that are higher than 5 feet both like glasses of milk. Meaning it's a bit of a puzzle where you're given small snippets of information, and you have to tie them together in order to figure out who sabotaged the rides at the amusement park. At least that's the theme of this one. Each one will have its own theme, and then each one has different cases, so you can play it multiple times. In theory, you can replay it once you've gone through the cases. I imagine, like, if you're pulling it out a year later, that's great. If you're trying to pull it out the same year, you probably, not the same year. If you're trying to play a case again within the same month, you'll probably remember stuff. If you're playing it 5 months later, you probably won't, but I believe each box comes with 9 cases. So that's 9 games you can go through. There are multiple boxes, and they are a lot of fun, great for both kids and adults in my opinion, but really solid game from Haba Games. Then we have Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven's coming out with miniatures. I did a full video on that, so I won't heavily go into it now, but Gloomhaven's coming out with a miniature line, so that's fun to know. We have AEG. Stop by AEG to try. AEG was showcasing 2 games, one of which I've already had, which is Rolling Heights. Rolling Heights is fantastic. I will have coverage on the channel at some point soon. They cycled prototypes, so what I did is I've already played Rolling Heights and really enjoyed Rolling Heights. It is fantastic. I am spoiling the review. I don't care. But I really enjoy Rolling Heights. It is a game that I like more than Quaxel Quedlinburg and more than Cubitos, and I like both those games already. But Rolling Heights is also within our own game group. From people who prefer one or the other, like I know Shira, who you've seen on the channel probably, maybe, over on Crackloop as well. She does not like Quaxel Quedlinburg. My wife does not like Cubitos, but both of them really like Rolling Heights. So Rolling Heights is going to see a lot of play once it comes out. I already had a chance to cover it. The review will be coming later. Basically, they're cycling prototypes, so people who have the prototype, and then the reviews and content will go up in January. I believe Kickstarter is late January or early February, if I'm not mistaken. But that's one game. And then I had a chance to see Meeples and Monsters, which was already on Kickstarter and should be coming out, delivering, something like that. But I will be getting a copy of Meeples and Monsters because it looks fun. It looks on the lighter side. I'm not as confident that that one will be as much of a hit as Rolling Heights is for me, but it did look fun, so we'll see how that goes. Then we had CGE. CGE, who I stopped by, spoke to them a bit, but Lost Winds of Arnak Expedition Leaders was the obvious reason I dived into that one. I hope to play this today. I just read the rules for it, and I really hope to sit down and play it today. The amount of games I want to sit down and play with my game group, with myself, with my wife, with my family, it's a good problem to have. But I want to sit down and play Lost Winds of Arnak. For me, I think the expansion is just going to make the game, which I already love, it's just going to make it even better. Because I just wanted to do more stuff in Lost Winds of Arnak. And what Expedition Leaders does is it says, hey, by the way, here's some more stuff you can do. And that's it. That's all it is. Here's more stuff. You have your own personal Expedition Leader who has a different ability that will give you more stuff that you can get done. So you're literally just doing more in a game. That doesn't say like, oh, now you have 1 round less. No, you have the same number of rounds. You're just doing more. So I am excited to dive into it. There's, I think, 6 Expedition Leaders, maybe 5. I think 6, though. 6 Expedition Leaders, let's say with that. And they each have a different ability or playstyle. So now you can play Lost Winds of Arnak 6 times in a row and play a completely different game, completely different playstyle. It is such a good game. I really like Lost in Sovranti. Happy I picked that up. Now, past that, over at CG, they had Codenames, they had Galaxy Trucker, they had all the usual things. They'll have a bunch of new games coming out next year. They're leaning into some new things that they're doing, which I'm not going to speak about because I don't know what's public yet. But either way, that's CGE. We have Middara. I briefly stopped by Middara, just the Middara booth. They're selling a lot of Middara stuff over there, as you might imagine, because it's the Middara booth. I'm so good with words. Middara, their company name. What's the company name? I should even know the company name. I don't remember. They have a different name. It's not called Middara. But either way, the company that sells Middara, I stopped by them to say hi. I already have a copy of the game. I've unboxed it. I haven't played it yet. I need to dive in and play it. I'm halfway through the rules from read the freaking manual. RTFM. RTFM, it's a channel. That's Shay Parker, who does the channel. Fantastic how to play on Middara. I'm halfway through that. Hope to finish that and play it. We have Jurassic Park Legacy. Okay, so this is one of those times where I may throw up photos. I have a few times I may or may not have thrown up photos here. But Jurassic Park Legacy coming from Prospero Hall. Lots to cover on that one, so let's go into this one for a few minutes. So, they will be coming to Kickstarter. I want to say January 15th. I want to say it might have been a little later. In January, I believe January 15th, and sorry, just talking too long. Jurassic Park Legacy is going to be $120 of game. That's what it is, which I think is going to be a hard sell, but I also think people are going to be there for the IP. It's going to have a $100,000 funding goal. It's going to have 12 missions you can play before you go into the ongoing mode that you can just play forever. We'll talk about that soon because I am, as you, I'm very skeptical about whether that will happen or not. So that's 12 games, including the tutorial, plus an ongoing mode for $120 plus shipping and handling and all that. I do not know what the MSRP will be. I don't know what the retail availability will be. I imagine it will be available at retail. I don't know for sure, but if it is, I mean, I'm going to be all over that campaign in a good way. I want the game, to be very clear. I want the game, and I'm probably going to get the game because my wife and I have a weakness for legacy games, and we really enjoy the experience. And honestly, $120 for 12 games, that's $10 a game. We've done far worse. Even just playing an unlock game will fall into that range, or an exit game, because unlocks you can replay, and this you can't. There'll be no reset pack, at least as of now. Maybe that'll change depending on how the campaign does. I have to imagine, and I might be wrong here, I have to imagine that they think the campaign is going to do better than I think the campaign is going to do. Maybe I'm wrong here, but $120 is such a hard sell for 10 games. For 12 games, 12 plays. Because you can't reset it. It's fail forward. You never replay the scenario. So it's literally 12 play sessions for $120 plus shipping. So it's really going to be like $150. So it's literally like $15 or $12, $13 per game. That's a lot of money. And now they're heavily selling the fact that it is replayable. But meaning it's ongoing. You finish it and you have your own map and then you can replay it forever. Which I am hugely skeptical about because almost every single legacy game that has been created till date, whenever they introduce and now you can play it forever, no one ever does, or very, very infrequently do they. Sometimes you have games like Aeon's End, where you can combine the content, and so that changes the conversation. It's not that you're playing Aeon's End forever, but yeah, you get the cards you had for the game, and you get to combine it to your regular Aeon's End, and at least you got something out of it. That's a little different. But most legacy games that you can play forever, people don't play forever. So I don't know what is actually going to happen here. Now, to be fair, I did speak to them about it, because I put a video on the channel a while ago talking about what you need to do to make a legacy game playable forever. And from talking to them, it seems that they are actually trying to do that. The idea of constantly still giving people content effectively. Which you can watch my video, I'm not going to heavily go into it right now, I don't want to sidetrack. But I do believe that there's a chance that there's more of a reason to dive into their legacy game once it's done than other legacy games. That said, as with any game that offers a legacy on playable forever mode, I won't believe that it's going to happen until it actually happens. And for every other person who's looking at a $120 price tag plus shipping on 12 missions, they're likely going to have the same thought. Do I think it'll hit the 100,000? Yes, I do. I think the IP combined with legacy, I think it's enough and there'll be people like me, people who are like, it's not worth it compared to other legacy content, but there's not a large amount of legacy games out there. There's like, 15, 20 legacy games out there? There's not a large amount. Campaign games, a dime a dozen. Legacy games, they are much less frequent. And so I am willing to pay a price that is relatively speaking not worth it. I mean, we got 24 games out of my city and we paid $20 for it. So it's always an interesting conversation. I'm curious to see how things go. As far as the game itself does look cool. It looks like they have a bunch of mini games. They have different buildings that you're going to be putting buildings on the board, and the buildings kind of represent mini games. You can wander into the building, then you go into a bit of a mini game. You're going to be unlocking monsters. You're going to be creating your own hybrid monsters, some of which you'll see in the game, some of which you won't. And this is part of the fun of it, which is the stuff you don't see. Once you're done with the legacy game, you can kind of have options to explore it. So there is that motivation to keep playing, so you can explore the stuff you didn't get to explore or uncover. They're going to have characters. I don't know if characters live or die or stuff like that. They were giving us information without giving us full spoilers, so not really a lot of spoilers. You're going to have a bunch of actions as you wander around the board and you recon and you try to figure out, okay, the dinosaurs in this zone are going to be taking this kind of action, then you need to plan around that because you have a limited number of actions each round, so now if you know that the monsters are going to be moving and attacking, the dinosaurs, not monsters, then you need to wander around. Or maybe you build a barrier and you try to focus them in, or you try to shelter and move their herbivores over to some other areas so they don't get eaten by the T-Rexes. So, interesting looking game. I'm definitely going to be picking it up. That's not the question for me. The question is how many other people are picking it up and how many other people are willing to pay a premium price. I mean, they say it's like £7 a game. Okay, I don't think people look at that. I don't think people care about that. I think people care about, and maybe I'm projecting the way I look at things, but I think people care about the fact that it's 12 games for $140 once you factor in shipping or whatever. So $140 for 12 games. That is a big ask. That's what it comes down to. But we'll see. I am still excited. We have Resonym Games, who've done surrealist dinner parties. They have, I forget the names of the games. They have a bunch of games, including they have I believe a roll and write coming to Kickstarter. I'll be checking that out at some point. But they had a bunch of games I got to see. They had Mechanica, I think it's the name of it. They had a few games I briefly got to take a look at and demo. I need to talk more about it. I need to reach out to them and talk to them about their upcoming roll and write and figure out what's going on there, because I generally like roll and writes. We have Starling Games. I don't really stop by Starling that much, did I? No, they had a cool tree. They had the giant Everdell tree. I don't think I actually stopped by Starling, so never mind. It shouldn't be in this section. We have Board Game Tables. So I have Factory Funner from them. I got that collection, Bear Raid, Factory Funner, and Ghosts of Christmas Future, I think it's called. But I have that. I just got from them. Just punched Factory Funner. I want to dive into it as soon as I have a chance. I just need more time to play more games. But Board Game Tables, they had a large booth setting up, playing and demoing their games as usual. I'm excited. I generally like their stuff. Generally, I do not love Kabuto Sumo, but I would say generally I have liked and enjoyed a lot of Board Game Tables games. They make them very accessible. I'm also very excited for Bear Raid because apparently it's a much heavier. This is not Bear Raid, this is Factory Funner, but I'm very excited for Bear Raid because apparently it's a heavier game than I thought it might be. So I want to dive into that one, and as compared to Stockpile, and I love Stockpile. So yeah, I need to check out that and see how that goes. We have Stronghold Games, who I believe are Indie Board and Cards, same basic booth. They have Astronauts coming out. This is actually not at the convention, or if it was, I didn't see it. But I'm excited for Astronauts. Speaking of Aeon's End, this is the reboot of Aeon's End. I will have more coverage coming to the channel about it, but what I'll say is Aeon's End is a game that I always liked, but I always thought it was okay. I enjoyed it, and in theory, if you take the components of Aeon's End, it's always a game that I should have liked more than I did. I was always okay with it. I didn't love it. I enjoyed it, and there's too many games in that genre for me to keep a game that I liked. Versus Astronauts, I'm not saying it's the best game ever, I'm not going to go that far, but I really like Astronauts. I've really been enjoying it. I find that it does a lot of the things that I should have liked in Aeon's End, but I do like them more in Astronauts. I will say the one thing I don't like is it's a deck builder, and they've shifted from having a fixed market stack of cards to a rotating market stack, and I prefer fixed market stacks in general. That's the one step down for me, but overall, a lot of things, I just like them more. We'll talk about it more at some point. Past that, they're selling Stronghold, they're selling Terraforming Mars, doing all that stuff for me, and it's interesting, by the way, because this is the same designers, I believe, as Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Now, I like Ares Expedition, I do, but I love Terraforming Mars, and Ares Expedition feels like a watered-down Terraforming Mars to me. So for me, Terraforming Mars is the beast, is the goat, not the beast, is the goat, versus Ares Expedition was okay. It was a good game. I really enjoy it. Do not get me wrong. It almost made my top 100 this year, but it's just outside. But Astronauts for me, I didn't love Aeon's End, and I find Astronauts great. So I find this an interesting conversation here to be had around the nature of making games more accessible. Even Seven Wonders Architects, by the way, same conversation. Around taking a game, making it a little bit easier to dive into, a little more accessible, and then seeing whether it hits for different types of people. Very often, it'll hit for the people that the original did not work for, but it'll feel watered down for the people who the original did work for. That's an interesting conversation in its own right. But either way, We have Snapships. Oh, Snapships. This was a toy. Okay, Snapships was a toy that I almost picked up. I was so close, I was debating it. I just wasn't sure if my kids would or wouldn't like it, and they weren't there. But Snapships is basically a little toy system that you can snap together these little ships, almost like Legos kind of, where you're just building little ships out of these components, and you mount a little blaster and a little radar, and you put the little bits that click together. Look really compelling. They're making a game out of it, which I'm actually less interested in. I'm just interested in it as a toy, just wandering around and saw it. Almost picked it up. I was like, do I get the all-in? Because like I like going all-in. They have like all the stuff like $200. I was like, I don't know if my kids will like it. I'll hold off. Maybe I'll get it in the future. I'm sure it'll be at other conventions my kids will be at, and I can get it then. We have Manor Games. Manor Games, they're coming out with Seas of Havoc, I believe. We'll talk about that when I have a chance to actually play it. Past that, they had Lawyer Up. They had... Is it Lawyer Up? Lawyer Up. They had Lawyer Up. They had... Merchants of Magic. They had... What's the other game they had? It's right on my shelf over here. Set a Watch. They were going through all those. Managed to talk to them for a bit. Keymaster Games. I talked to Keymaster. I picked up Trails. I just read the rules for this one. Hoping to dive into it soon. I love Parks. Always have. I have to play Parks with the Nightfall expansion. I haven't done that yet. I want to play Trails. Trails actually looks interesting. It looks like it's falling into the same genre as these conversations. A lighter, different version of the same game. Although Trails looks like it might be different enough. I'm curious to see how it'll go. It may be unenjoyable. I assume from reading the rules that I'll like it. The question is how much will I like it, and will I still keep it, or will I just prefer to play Parks every time? But they were talking about, the various games, the things they're looking into. They're diving down into like other board game adjacent categories of stuff. I don't know whether they're doing puzzles or other things. I don't have a firm idea of what they're doing, but they're diving more heavily into board game adjacent just because they don't want to focus on too many board games at once. They want to like really let a board game sit there and go through the development process properly, but they want to do other things at the same time. So I don't know exactly what falls in that umbrella, but we shall see. We have Arcane Wonders. Arcane Wonders, I don't think there's anything specific that I want to talk about with Arcane Wonders. I stopped by, I saw their games, but I saw them at Origins, and I don't think they had anything new over there. They had Furnace, which is great, still love Furnace. They have Air, Land, and Sea Critters at War, which is a cuter version of Air, Land, and Sea, so a solid one there. And yes, Aquatica is still one of my favorite games, and they had Aquatica. We had Tidal Blades. Tidal Blades! I did not get to see Tidal Blades, unfortunately, but I did get to talk to a bunch of people. James Hudson from Skybound Games was there. He was demoing Tidal Blades. Unfortunately, I tried to find him in the second half of Sunday, not realizing that he was leaving. This is one of the downsides of going for one day. Not realizing that he was leaving by the second half because he had to catch a flight. So I should have actually tried to find him right away, but hindsight, I didn't know or think about it. I didn't schedule anything with him. But Tidal Blades was being shown, the new Tidal Blades. Tidal Blades 2 was being showcased at PAX. It's basically a dungeon crawler. Think Gloomhaven, think Gloomhaven. But it's that kind of genre of game. But the card mechanism, as opposed to being Gloomhaven, where you play 2 cards, top, bottom, all that, it's going more for what Monumental did. Similar in the sense that you have a little grid of 9 cards, and then you activate a row or column as you slowly build out, play more cards, slowly through the course of multiple games, building out your deck and developing your deck, and going through that. I liked it in Monumental. It can be a table hog, but it's a little different than Monumental. Monumental is a row and column. This is a row or column. But I want to dive into it. I want to see where it lies for me. I love the visual aspect of Tidal Blades. People who played Tidal Blades seem to be having a great time, including people I know and spoke to. So I'm very intrigued to see where it ends up. But that is basically Tidal Blades, coming to Kickstarter soon, I believe. And again, it's not Tidal Blades. It is Tidal Blades, the dungeon crawler, totally unrelated, past carrying over the characters and theme. So if you didn't like Tidal Blades, this one may still work for you. And if you did like Tidal Blades, this one may not. But it's just worth covering. Then we have Grand Gamers Guild. I managed to stop by Grand Gamers Guild. It was the funniest thing. I stopped by the beginning of the day and the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, they had a bunch of games left. At the end of the day, he was selling the last copy of literally, he had a single copy of a game. He's like, this is my last copy if anyone wants to take it. And it was 1 copy left. I'm curious if he actually sold it. Grand Gamers Guild does, they did Garinto, which I still need to cover. Really enjoy that one. What else do they have? They had the Belgian Beer Race. They have a bunch of other games too, but I don't remember exactly what they had. They have a great game, great looking game, haven't played it, great looking game with like these acrylic standees and looks like some sort of battle thingy-majiggy. I don't know what it is at all. It looked really cool, so I'll look into that at some point. Then we had, lastly, video's almost done, PSC Games. Don't know why I saved this for last, just happened to be. Any games I didn't cover here? Nope, I talked about all these stuff. PSC Games, they're doing the Rome Total War, the board game. I am very intrigued by that one. Oh, and also they have Caesar and Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is fantastic. Very excited for Caesar, but they have wards. I need wards in my head. Rome Total War. Rome Total War, the board game, which I have been completely uninterested in until seeing it at their booth. When I saw it at their booth, it actually looks fairly compelling. I don't know if I'm going to back it or not. I'm trying to be more restrictive about my backs because I have too many games and I'm not playing them fast enough. I'm playing a lot of games, to be very clear, but not playing them fast enough. But Rome Total War, it has this aspect of kind of armies of cards that you have a sense that the armies are approaching, and you know how many units are in the armies, but you don't know what types of units. So there's a heavy fog of war element to the game where you see marching armies on the board, but you don't know what those armies are comprised of. Now, you could take scouting actions or things like that to try to find out more, but it adds this element of you see like, oh no, you're marching towards me. I also don't know what you're marching towards me with. How do I prep for that? How do I account for that? You see the other players are trying to add things to their armies, but are they adding fewer, stronger troops? Are they adding multiple lighter troops? Are they trying to scare or intimidate you? Or are they trying to undersell you so that they can completely demolish you? Lots of dice rolling and abilities depending on the types of units you build. It looks like it's going to be a heavy area control, civ building game to a degree. I don't know exactly all the mechanics and elements, but I will say that I went from being completely uninterested in the game, down here, completely uninterested in the game, to being somewhat interested, although still very dependent on how things actually turn out. The art's not pulling me in, I'll admit. The art doesn't. I mean, that's true for Blitzkrieg or Caesar as well. I just don't find PSC Games, the art typically has not pulled me in. Although they also had that heavy game, the Defense Protocol or something, whatever it is, from David Tursi. They had, it's called something like that. It's like Protocol of Defense. I don't know. You might know what the game I'm talking about. Something to do with protocol and defense and a whole bunch of... It's an asymmetric like war game from David Tursi. That one actually looks cool. But there are other games that I've played. I've liked the games, but not liked the art. And that might happen to me with Rome Total War. I might find myself just not compelled enough by the art to pick it up and then start playing it at some future date and really loving it. As of right now, I'm interested in it. I do not know if I'll be backing it, but it went from completely off my radar and completely uninterested to interested and compelled, but still not sure what I'm actually doing. And that was basically my PAX Unplugged experience. Spending a day wandering around, not really playing any games, going to booths, seeing what they have, seeing what's coming out, seeing what's new, seeing how things are doing in general. It's fascinating to just be at a convention, to talk to people, engaging with various fans, whatever, whenever they stop me. It's great to see people. All kinds of people, content creators. I ran into a whole bunch of content creators. I ran into obviously Quacklope because I didn't actually go with Quacklope. I ran into Quacklope, ran into Hungry Gamer, ran into Tim from the Dice Tower, Tim Middara from the Dice Tower, Sarah Shaw, Board Games in a Minute. I ran into there's other people I ran into. One Stop Co-op Shop. Anyone else? Michael Kelly, One Stop Co-op Shop. Who else did I run into? I ran into a bunch of content creators, a whole bunch of content creators there, as you might imagine, because we go there to talk to other people and, put faces to names and all that stuff. Then there were a bunch of publishers there, publishers I've worked with, publishers I haven't worked with, a bunch of designers there. I got to speak to Henry Audubon, the designer, Henry Audubon, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Ran into him, he's a designer of both Trails and Parks. Parks I love, Trails I haven't played yet, but talk to like AJ from AJ from Ryder Games. Just a lot of people to engage with, to the companies I've worked with, people I've worked with, content creators who I like and watch their content and or have also collaborated with in different ways. It's just a fun thing to do. I saw a comment from somebody on a Facebook group that I don't disagree with. There's a comment saying, hey, I don't really go to conventions. I don't think I'm the target audience for them. I think it's just basically for industry people to talk to industry people. And I said to him, I said, hey, I don't disagree with you. For me, that's who I am. I always went to conventions. I didn't go to conventions because I didn't feel the need to play games there. I didn't feel the need to pay more for copies of games that I can get cheaper online, especially if you're patient. And so I didn't bother going to them. I like them a lot now that I have a reason to go, but I very much was not the target audience. But I think there are different target audiences. I think there's content creators or industry people who are doing it as part of their networking, which is a factor. I think there are people who like the process of just going to a place and buying games, even if they're overpaying. It's part of the experience. You come home with 2 bags full of games. You're like, look at my PAX haul, and it's a lot of fun. I think there are people who go to sit down and play games. I think there are people who go to learn and see more about games. I think there are different kinds of people. I happen to have been in the category of people who wouldn't have gone to a convention and didn't for 8 years until I started doing content creation. But there are all kinds of people who go for different reasons. And you build relationships too. You see all these people and you meet all these faces that you start seeing at conventions again and again, and you don't really run into them otherwise, but like you see them at a convention and you're like, oh hey, I saw you at Origins, it's good to see you again, how's it going? And then you could talk and schmooze for a bit, and you see them the next convention. sit down and start playing games, especially if you're going to Canada games, like if you're going to Dice Tower West or BGG Con, more sit down and gaming conventions, you can build relationships there as well. I just think it's a different kind of thing. But that was my day, running around talking to people, both content creators, both publishers, seeing and getting some games, and just generally having a good time. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.